A swale, which you see right here, is a perfectly level water harvesting ditch on contour. So as the rain falls, it hits the ground, it creates runoff events, it flows into the swale, and the swale forces the water to soak into the landscape, effectively drought-proofing your property. It's also fantastic at growing trees. You can see a couple of fruit trees here. There's a mimosa there, there's a black locust, there's an apple, there's a pear, there's all kinds of trees on these swales that I have here at the demonstration site. Today, I'm gonna show you how to decide and how to plant a tree on a swale. And here's a little tip, depending on where you live, it's going to determine the location of your trees on your swale. Just a friendly reminder, if you need an on-site consultation, I'll come out to your property, tell you what to do, when to do it. If you want that, hit up the email down below, shoot me an email saying, hey, I'd like a permaculture consultation. Also, the 5-day Sustain Me event with Barbara O'Neill up in North Carolina, they have just released day passes there. So if you're scrolling through the catalog or the itinerary and you're like, there's one day in particular I'd really like to go to, then you can do that. You can purchase day passes. All of that is linked down below, as well as the Midwest Preparedness Conference. I'll be there in May. And actually, I was just talking to Bobby this morning about it. I'll be processing an animal there. I'll be teaching you how to make compost, and we'll also be doing an after actions report of Hurricane Helene and like what we've learned from Hurricane Helene, just stuff like that. Can't wait to see you guys there. That's going to be in Kansas in May. Both those events are linked down below in the comments. Not the comments, the description. You know what I mean. With that said, let's get on with the video. Now, before we get too deep into this video, let's talk about what a swale is. So this right here, you can see it's composed of two different parts. There's the ditch side, the side with the water. That's the ditch side. And the mound side is the side you see right here with the trees planted on top. This system right here, as the water falls to the ground, it hits the ground, and then it flows this way. You can see my bee boxes. Those are a higher altitude than this ditch right here, but just by inches, really. The water hits the ground, it flows downhill, as water tends to do, and you put this ditch in the way, so it captures the water. Now, the water is forced to stay here and soak into the landscape, which is downhill of this, and basically rehydrates your landscape. It forces the water to soak into your landscape instead of running off, and it drought proofs your property, fireproofs your property. There's a ton of benefits to that. So where I live here in Texas, then this is more like a Mediterranean climate. I'm going to plant my trees on the top of the mound, which you can see right there. There's that mimosa planted on the top of the mound right there. That's where I want to plant where I am in a Mediterranean climate, and that's where you would do it in a tropical climate, and anything basically other than like super arid. Like if you get 1 to maybe 2 rain events per year, then you actually want to plant your trees, instead of on top of the mound, you want to plant them in the ditch, because you want them to be able to soak up all of that water during your 1 or 2 rain events. So you plant your trees in the ditch. Now, your trees in the ditch aren't going to suffer from like prolonged wet roots because of the nature of the environment that an arid environment is. It's going to drain really quickly. It's going to soak into the soil really quickly. And yeah, it's going to be gone. If I were to do that here, if I were to plant my trees in the ditch here in Texas, all of my trees would drown because I have heavy clay soil and water stays for an extended period of time in this ditch, and it doesn't really go down during the spring season. Like very rarely will the bottom of this ditch be exposed during spring. This might be a little bit better of an angle, but here's the J at the end of a swale, so the water doesn't just spill out to the side and overflow that way. Here's the J, and then here's the body of the ditch right here. Here's my little bee boxes. And then it kind of follows contour, which is the reason it's not a straight line, and it comes back and curves back up this way. Now, this is the same exact earthwork and technique that Jeff Lawton used to green the Jordan Desert. These techniques work. They do fantastic. These swales are the reason that all these fruit trees here survived after 4 or 5 years of abandonment. This is the property that we abandoned for 4 or 5 years in the heat of Texas. One of the hottest summers recorded in Texas occurred during those 4 or 5 years, and these trees survived. It's because we drought-proofed the property. We had the earthworks here to facilitate capturing, harvesting, and storing water for those times of drought. Oh, also, I should need to say before we move on, There is no land that is too flat for a swale. You do not have to have any kind of terrain on your property in order for you to dig swales. Because if I dig, like, let's say you have perfectly flat land and I dig a swale, well, I've just now created the new lowest point on that land with the swale. So the water is going to flow in there, it's going to collect there, and it's going to water my trees. So with that being said, let's go ahead and plant a tree. So this is the spot where I want to plant my fruit tree. Now, if this is a brand new swale, like you just dug it, then you can kind of skip this next step. But the first thing I'm going to do is take a scythe or a machete or a weed eater and clear an area for my tree to go. Right here is this oak that I'm going to be planting. In fact, I think this is a Shumard oak. This is one of the free trees from the ag extension that I picked up. And I'm going to put this here on the swale because here, this is where design kind of comes into play. Here I have a bunch of understory trees and fruit trees and stuff like that. I don't have anything that's super big that's going to provide enough shade for whenever I graze sheep in between these swales. These swales are creating something of a silvopasture. So I need a bigger overstory tree. Now, granted, this is going to be a while before it becomes an overstory tree, but I need a bigger overstory tree to spread out and cast a bigger net of shade in between these swales over here. So that's why I'm picking this exact location. Also, I have it on the furthest west side of this swale. So when the sun is in the west, which is on the other side of that camera, the shadow created by this tree will be more on my property versus putting it all the way on the far east side of this swale. If I do it over there, then it's going to cast very little shadow on the property where I have the actual sheep. So just kind of keep that in mind, keep those factors in consideration. But after you've cleared your area for your tree, the next thing you're going to do is just dig a hole for your tree. Now in this particular case, since this is a bare root tree, I'm going to dig more of a slit than a hole. Created this little slit. I'm going to shove this tree down in there, make sure the roots, have plenty of space and stuff like that. And I'm going to try to plant this tree as high as possible and make sure that the only thing getting buried are areas that have roots. Anything that it does not have a root, then I want it as high up out of the ground as possible. Most people make the mistake of planting trees far too deep. And for this location, for where I'm at, this is exactly where I want to plant the tree, on top of the mound of the swale. Now, we're not going to stop here. We're actually going to do a few more steps. Now, I could stop here and then just let the tree grow and stuff like that, but I want to try to give it the best opportunity to thrive as possible. So I'm going to do a few more things. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to use the swale to do this next step, is get some cardboard, saturate it, and I'm going to apply this to the base of the tree. Now, thankfully, my swales are full right now, and I can just use the water from the swales to actually soak my cardboard. And this is a step you definitely don't want to forget. If you add your cardboard and it's not wet, then there's a chance that this cardboard will actually wick water, which is the opposite effect that you want for your tree. You want it to harvest water whenever it needs to, and you want it to wick water only when it needs to, not just all the time. Otherwise, you're gonna have to have like a super heavy rain event just to break that hydrophobic layer, and it's kind of counterproductive to what you're wanting. And it doesn't have to be pretty. Literally just layer a couple of layers of wet cardboard around the base of your tree. There is one important step you want to follow when doing this, and that's make sure that the cardboard, and I'll show you guys whenever we get to that point, but make sure your cardboard is not coming in contact with the base of your tree. You want the base of your tree to be like untouched by any additional material. And you're also probably wondering like, you didn't do any soil amendments or anything like that. That's coming up. And the reason we don't add anything to the hole is because that's not how nature fertilizes its plants and trees and stuff like that. If you'll notice in the forest, nothing gets fertilized before it gets basically planted. The way nature fertilizes is basically from the surface. You'll notice in the forest that leaves fall and they land on the surface of the ground, obviously. They don't get dug up and tilled in or anything like that. They just break down on the surface, and the microbes make the transaction for the plants around there. They're the ones that'll break down the leaves, decompose them, and then bring those nutrients to the surface or to the soil. And that's exactly what we're going to mimic. This cardboard, it does a few different things. It's going to soak up water when it's dry, and it's going to wick water once it's completely saturated. A few other things, it's going to help with weed suppression. Anything that's trying to grow up around this tree and compete with this tree is going to get suppressed by this cardboard. Now, the third thing, and this is one of the more important things and one of the more valuable things for corrugated cardboard, and also don't worry about inks or dyes or anything like that, but the number one most important reason I like to use cardboard is because it attracts worms. These corrugated pieces right here, the worms view that as like some super highway, and they're just super attracted by it, and they come out the woodworks just to come eat up and travel along this cardboard. It invites the worms, which is going to benefit everything in the surrounding area. That's the number one reason I like to use cardboard. And if I have healthy, alive soil, and after I cover this up, and if I check on it in like 6 months, all of this cardboard should be pretty unrecognizable or just barely recognizable if I have healthy and alive soil. So cardboard's down. Before this dries out, next step. And now the final step, which is adding compost or a mulch. So you could use, I'm using compost here in this application because that's what I have a lot of, but you can definitely use like a hardwood mulch if you wanted to. You could also use like animal bedding if you wanted to. Any number of options are available when it comes to using your mulch. Like, you could use bamboo leaves, you could use hay, you could use straw. If you're gonna use hay or straw, then I would definitely use that in your chicken bedding first, just to get rid of any like potential seeds. You could also use like hardwood mulch. You could use the bagged stuff if you wanted to. Try not to use the red dye mulch because, let's be honest, nobody actually likes that red dyed mulch. So let's not use it. But in this case, I'm using compost. And what this is going to do is provide all of the needs for this tree right here. Now, when I add the compost or whenever you add the mulch or anything like that, make sure it's pulled away from the base of the tree. If I'm looking down on it, it should look like a donut and not a mountain or a volcano or anything. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If I have anything up against the base of this tree, then it's going to increase the risk of infection and stuff like that. And I am wanting this tree to survive and thrive and live for a very long time. So we're not going to increase the infection sites. And that's basically it. Now, as far as spacing on your swales, if I'm doing dwarf or semi-dwarf trees, then I'll do like 10-foot spacing between the trees on a swale. Keeping in mind that you can always prune or train whatever limbs are coming in contact with each other and rubbing up against each other. But you can have some pretty close spacing on this swale. Now, since this is such a large overstory tree, but it's not going to be a large overstory for a pretty long time, I can go ahead and plant some of my other trees or other bushes or shrubs or anything like that in pretty close proximity to this oak right here. And there we go. We have a fully planted tree on top of the swale right here. Perfect. It went perfectly, no issues at all. When I dig into the swale, I noticed that the soil in the swale mound actually really wasn't that bad. With all the growth and the vegetation that's been on here, I imagine it's a lot better than the original Play-Doh type clay that was out here in this Texas soil. But there we go. Just repeat the process until you have a swale that's full of trees or until you've reached enough. You don't have to necessarily plant trees on a swale, but it's an awesome tree growing system. So like, why not? So yeah, there we go. If you need a consultation from me, hit up the email down below. Can't wait to see you guys at the events. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you.